Happy Easter. He is risen, and that's the truth. You know, today, just a day after his resurrection, isn't it interesting? The first thing that we ask is it actually true? Did he actually rise from the dead? Because we know that it says something about our life. In fact, that's what everybody in Israel was asking. Is it actually true? Even the Jews themselves, we hear that today. The Jewish leaders went to pay off the soldiers who were standing at the tomb, meant to be standing guard so that no one would steal the body of Jesus. They stood there. He was still gone. But they paid the soldiers to actually lie, to tell everybody, hey, yeah, somebody stole him. We couldn't keep him away from the tomb, and they took his body when we were sleeping, when we weren't looking. In the face of truth, they tell a lie. Why? Because this would change their life, and that's so uncomfortable. Isn't it uncomfortable when our lives had to change in the face of truth? We would rather accept being comfortable than actually living out what is true. For the Jews, it would have meant that this guy actually was the Messiah, the guy that they put to death. If he actually was God, if he was the Messiah, if he actually died, if he actually rose from the dead by his own power, came back to life and lived again, they would have to leave Judaism. They couldn't be Jews anymore. They would have to be Christians. That was too uncomfortable. You know, even today, modern atheists will say, maybe Jesus wasn't dead. That's one of the solutions. Isn't it interesting that whenever we talk about the crucifixion, even with modern atheists, no one argues whether Jesus died. It's only when we start talking about the resurrection and how that will change everything that we then go back and try to correct it and say, maybe he didn't die on the cross. But we all know that Jesus was beat within an inch of his life. In fact, they had to stop beating him for fear that he would die on the spot because they wanted to crucify him to make an example out of him, to embarrass him. And then he hung on the cross for 3 hours. He suffocated to death. And when everyone knew he was dead, they didn't even have to break his legs so that he couldn't lift himself up anymore. They actually pierced his side, his vital organs, to make sure that he was dead. And everyone saw that. In fact, no one argues whether the two guys hanging next to Jesus were dead. And they weren't even beat. They did hang on the cross for 3 hours. They didn't suffocate, but they broke their legs so that they would be dead. But no one argues whether those guys were dead. We just want to argue about Jesus. And why? Because if he died and he rose, it changes everything. Some will say, yeah, maybe it's true what they say. Maybe the disciples did steal his body. Well, it's quite apparent from the scriptures that if that were true, if they were supposed to steal his body, they didn't get that memo. They had no idea that they were supposed to do that. In fact, it's kind of embarrassing to say that the apostles were the ones who were most surprised that Jesus wasn't in the tomb. Shouldn't they have expected that? Didn't he tell them over and over that he would rise from the dead? Yet they were the ones who were the most surprised. In fact, if you were writing the scriptures, you would correct that so you wouldn't embarrass yourself. Yet that may be one of the greatest proofs that they show the actual truth, what actually happened, and that they were dumbfounded, that they didn't believe, that they struggled, but yet they changed their life. Maybe the greatest proof of all were the apostles themselves. Before Jesus' death, we see them hiding. They're hiding out because they're so afraid to be connected with Jesus, because they don't want to die with him, because they don't understand what's going on. And now you're going to see in the readings in the book of Acts, we're going to start read about how their lives changed drastically. Now they're in the face of every Jewish leader, of anybody, any Roman soldier, anybody who wants to persecute them. And they're saying, this man lives. This man who you crucified, this is Jesus. He is the Messiah. And we follow him, and we'll follow him wherever we go. In fact, most of those guys were martyred. All but John of the apostles were martyred for the truth that Jesus died. They altered their lives. It was uncomfortable, but it changed their life forever, so much so that they would never die for a lie. They would only die for something that's true. When you come into St. John's, we have written on the door right here in Latin, Via Veritas Vita, the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus claimed that's who he is. He is the way. He is the truth. Even when Pilate stands in his face and says, what is truth? Would we know truth if it was looking at us in the face? I know that I've had to ask my question about that my life. It was uncomfortable to change. And yet it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. The resurrection changes everything. Will it change you?